Warner Brothers have pulled advertising on X, formerly known as Twitter, amid a row over alleged anti-Semitism. It comes after the site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatred against white people. IBM suspended all its advertising on the platform after its ads were seen next to pro-Nazi posts. The White House has denounced Elon Musk's endorsement of the post, condemning what they called an abhorrent promotion of anti-Semitic and racist hate. Just Stop Oil protesters are holding a People versus Oil protest in the capital later today. Activists will be meeting at the London Eye around midday near the Shell headquarters. It's in protest against the government licensing more than 100 new oil and gas projects. The group say the government is imprisoning peaceful protesters and protecting the real criminals. Our reporter Will Hollis has more on this story.
Here outside of Shell, the oil company's headquarters, where there is a ring of steel around the building's base. That's because Just Stop Oil are coming right here today as they march through the capital city. They've described it as people versus oil. Thousands of people expected, and they're coming here for three reasons: to stand up to oil companies, to stand up to the Prime Minister, who they say is supporting these oil companies, and to fight for a better future for young people who they say are condemned to death by a system that favours oil over them.
The Chancellor says there's a chance taxes will be lowered in next week's autumn statement, arguing the economy had turned a corner. Jeremy Hunt says this is the moment to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year. In his strongest hint yet that tax cuts may be on the way, he signalled that in his autumn statement will be one for growth. It's understood the Chancellor is considering cutting rates on inheritance and business taxes while squeezing benefits by billions. And the creator of Wallace and Gromit and the Chicken Run films has enough clay for just one more film after its supplier ceased operations. When New Clay Products announced the closure of its facility near Torquay earlier this year, Aardman Animations quickly bought all its remaining stock. According to The Telegraph, the studio has just enough to complete its new Wallace and Gromit feature, due for release next year. New Clay produced a particular kind of plasticine, which is perfect for animating. Stop-motion artists say using the wrong kind would be like wearing the wrong trousers. Aardman is currently seeking new suppliers. Look forward to that. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now it's back to Dawn.
Thank you, Tamsin. If you hear any strange squeaking, by the way, it is the chair, not me, even though I am that old. Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with me, Dawn Newsom, and a squeaky chair. Over the past week, police forces up and down the country have been carrying out a biannual initiative known as Operation Sceptre. Back in May, this operation saw thousands of knives taken off the streets, as well as a big push on prevention and education. Our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, has been working with police in Lancashire this week to see exactly what they're doing to cut down on knife crime.
If we find a weapon, then we take that off the street. That then could have prevented a murder.
Hundreds of knives surrendered by the general public. This is just one of 16 knife bins in Lancashire. The weapons here are documented and then disposed of by the police as part of a nationwide initiative dubbed Operation Sceptre.
We're trying to make sure that, obviously, knife crime reduces. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's a slight increase in knife crime nationally. Obviously, there's a risk to people's lives, people getting injured, and obviously this seems to affect people under the age of 25. A lot of kids are getting involved in this, and we just want to try and make sure that stops.
Across England and Wales this week, police forces have been intensifying their crackdown on knife crime. But this initiative isn't just about taking knives off our streets.
We will go into some of our local schools, we'll give our knife presentation. Some of the local parks will do knife sweeps. We will do some enforcement at various locations where we might do increased visibility patrols, and we just want to educate people.
It's turned such tragedy into something that now saves not just our lives but other people's.
Almost 10 years ago, Byron lost his brother, John Joe, when he became a victim to a violent knife attack. As a result, Byron recognised the importance of education around knives and launched the JJ Effect, an anti-knife crime presentation with a difference.
They've been stabbed and they've been killed, so now one of your friends is dead.
That was the main goal, to be so brutally horrible and shocking that literally it shocks the fear and puts the fear into kids so much of potentially losing a life through carrying a knife or gang activity or criminal activity, that it would be set in stone and they'll always remember it.
Early prevention is a key element of Operation Sceptre, but police are also focused on tackling the issues that already exist. This week, a number of weapon sweeps have been carried out across Lancashire in an attempt to find and remove knives from the county streets.
A lot of the time we do find knives that wouldn't necessarily be solely used to commit harm, that might have been discarded in terms of just to dispose of them from a household. But we have also found knives such as zombie knives, machetes, hunting knives secreted in the area.
In the last Operation Sceptre, almost 10,000 knives were recovered. So, with knife crime still a major issue, this initiative remains as vital as ever. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Thank you, Sophie. Right, joining me now is anti-knife crime campaigner Alison Cope to talk further about some of the disturbing things we heard there from Sophie. Alison, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Operation Sceptre. Can you tell us a little bit more about how long it's been going on and is it working? I mean, it's a biannual thing, and the fact that we seem to keep having it every year doesn't seem to be making much difference.
I'll be honest. Some of the contents of that is shocking that I've just watched, because we know that the number one reason young people carry a knife is fear. Yet we've got some people saying there they want to put the fear of God into young people to stop them carrying a knife. That has the opposite impact. To let young people know that the world is a scary place that is full of knives and gangs and fear is actually giving such a negative message. It isn't working. Obviously, statistically, we are seeing that knife crime has gone through the roof, yet we still do these, biannual, week-long events, lots of PR, lots of images of weapons that are scaring young people. And if it was so effective and had such an impact in that week, surely it would be rolled out 52 weeks of the year. And it is beyond frustrating for someone like me that continually sees these PR stunts and young people killed the next week and the week after and the week after.
Alison, very strong words there. I mean, how did you become involved in this in any case? What's your experience of knife crime?
My son was murdered. My son was stabbed to death in 2013 by a young man with no previous convictions, no gang affiliation, who was scared, believed other people carried a knife, and like a lot of young people will say, they're carrying it for protection. Until we remove that fear and reinstate the support for young people, this is just going to be a stuck record, which it has become.
Alison, how old was your son, if you don't mind me asking?
My son Josh was 18 years of age. He died. He was murdered 6 weeks after his 18th birthday. Oh,
I'm so sorry. As I say, so many awful, tragic stories like this, and that's why it is so important to get this message out there. And it's also shocking that sort of like 18% of offenders are 10 to 17-year-old boys. They are 10 to 17. They're very, very young men. Why? I mean, you've explained that, young men in particular will carry knives because they feel frightened themselves. Why do you think a 10-year-old, though, would be carrying a knife?
Because if we have to go all the way back as to something you've just said, why? A young person, there are so many reasons, and that's what there was not one solution to this problem, because there's so many elements. We've got fear, we've got gangs, we've got drugs, but then we've also got the choice. We've sold young people a dream that it's fashionable, that it's cool to act in a certain way, and we've got lots of, I call them wannabes, pretending to be top, talking in a certain way, acting in a certain way. And we talk about influencers through social media, and young people are influencing the world to think they're something they're not, and society's responding accordingly. So an online argument is turning into a real life argument, the assumption is, oh, they probably carry a knife, because look at them with their balaclava and their attitude. A knife comes to that argument, and then we see another statistic, 12-year-old charged with murder, 13-year-old stabbed. Just Thursday this week, I attended the National Police Conference and the annual Police and Crime Commissioners Conference, and heard lots of statements about what we're planning to do for the next 3 years. And for me, it's very dangerous if we do not hold people accountable for where they've failed for the last 3 years, because they're constantly having these big PR stunts of these are our plans, this is what we hope to do, we're going to make sure there's more police officers, more youth services, coordinated response. 3 years down the line, they just recycle that message. 3 years down the line, recycle that message. And in between those messages, the morgues are being filled with children, the prisons are being filled with children. Who is actually holding those in power accountable for the mistakes that have been made? Unless we learn from those mistakes, we will continue to repeat those mistakes, and that is very, very dangerous.
Alison, I thank you so much for sharing your story with us this morning, and hopefully strong words from yourself, and hopefully people will actually start listening, and you know, children, basically we're talking children, stop dying. Thank you very much, Alison, and yeah, have a good, well, try to enjoy the rest of your weekend. Now, to look through the top stories of today, I'm delighted to be joined by MP for Shipley, Philip Davis. Obviously, usually sitting here with your lovely wife. I'm your work wife today. My husband sends his sympathy. Former Labour MP for Rochdale, Simon Danchuk. I'm stalking you, by the way, as well. And author and comedian John Martin, who we haven't met yet, but I'll probably start stalking you as well.
Feel free to.
It's what I do. It's what I do. Right, so now you are talking about newspapers. Now, full confession here, I haven't read some of the stories you're talking about. So, what are we talking first? We're talking ginger first.
Well, we can talk ginger if you want to, Dawn.
Go on.
Page 18 of The Sun today.
Well, I went into it in a polite way, because I could say, should we talk about your sex life first, Phil? But I thought we'd stick to the ginger line. Well... Seeing as your wife's probably watching.
I do like a good sex story, and I do like a good newspaper headline. And page 18 of The Sun, I think, is an excellent headline. The headline is Ginger Rogers. Right, and
he went there. He read it out. Yeah, go on.
And apparently, ginger could spice up your sex life. A study has suggested.
This is the root rather than the hair colour, by the way.
It is definitely yes, it is. Although who knows? I don't know. Maybe the hair colour does something too. But apparently, people who eat more of this fiery root have a higher libido and get lucky more often. I never understand who gets funded for these research studies, to be perfectly honest. But anyway, I know that it's true. I was a bit dubious about this, but I know that it's true because outside Simon was telling me that he is rather partial to ginger, and I think he's living proof that ginger does spice up your sex life.
Yeah,
it works.
Coco, my wife cooks a lot of ginger, makes me a lot of ginger.
Right, okay.
And
Good morning, Coco.
I can confirm that it works wonders. But the headline reminds me of one that I saw outside a pub on a billboard.
Oh, dear Lord, where are we going?
It said, Viagra won't make you James Bond, but it will make you Roger Moore. So I thought it was quite funny. I won't give up the day job. But,
well, I'm the comedian here. I'm going to bring things down to earth. I like to keep on top of the news.
I think we're already quite earthy as it is, to be honest with you.
I like to keep on top of the news, got my finger on the pulse, be top. Where is Esther, by the way?
She's probably hiding behind the sofa already, I can imagine.
She sent her love to everybody.
Bless her. It's lovely to be here. I've got a new suit for the show as well. I only got yesterday. I don't know how to get this off. How do you get this off? It won't come off.
Right, OK, well, thank you very much for that. It's a very lovely suit.
So is yours. Look at you. You look like you've been tangoed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like a giant tomato. Anyway, so we're moving on from ginger now. OK, we are actually Simon coming to your story now. This is
and it's been all over the papers.
Yeah, go on. Tell us more about the story you
it's
picked.
Absolutely tragic. A teenager, 16, stalked an army veteran, 82, before killing him with a single punch. And so the gist gist of the story is that Dennis Clark, he was telling off some young guys at Derby bus station, and one of them stalked him, you know, followed him further along, then punched him and effectively killed him. So the murderer, to all intents and purposes, Omar Mmesh. The tragedy of this story, particularly, is that he only got 2 years.
2 years in youth detention, isn't it?
2 years for the murder of this
It's just absolutely
veteran.
shocking, isn't it? We've just been talking about knife crime, but it's...
Similar thing, yeah, awful.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's 2 lives ruined, isn't it? I mean, a young lad, you know, as you say, 2 years is not long enough, but obviously, you know, that 82-year-old man... Ooh, OK. Right, John, let's move on to your story, which is football.
We like football. We like football.
On a Saturday morning, unless you're an Everton fan.
Oh, that's not... You know, I'm not an Everton fan, but what they've done to Everton, I think it really has to happen to other clubs. If they just single out Everton, then it cannot be right. Everton have been deducted 10 points, and apparently it's for indiscrepancies, financial indiscrepancies, which they've spent on this new stadium, which to me is going to be a new asset, a great asset to the Premier League. I'm not saying, you know, if they bent the rules, that's right. But other clubs, big clubs, Manchester City, apparently have got over 100 financial discrepancies outstanding. So they've really got to clamp down on other clubs as well, or it's totally unfair and it's just corrupt.
So this has put Everton in the relegation zone?
Yes, it has.
They sort of seem to be turning their fortunes around.
I kind of had a feeling they were going to be in there anyway. You know, it's a great team. It's a great
turning
club.
Things round.
It's a great club, and I have many friends and family who support them. I'm from Liverpool, of course, but it's not fair. If they do it to other clubs, then I get it. But they cannot just single Everton out.
And they do seem to be punished as well for actually working with the FA, whereas the other clubs are being a bit more evasive about what's
if ever an organisation fits into the letters FA, then I think... No, but it's... I know.
It is just past 9 o'clock in the morning.
Well, can I say in my defence, I might have a bit of jet lag. I was in a hotel last night. I flew in last night. I was in a hotel, and it wasn't a posh hotel, and so much so they stole my towels. But I was in this hotel last night, Dawn, and I went to my room, opened the wardrobe. On the top shelf was a pillow and a blanket.
Right.
The worst night's sleep I've ever had in my life.
The old ones are the best. Thank you very much.
You leave Simon's soup out of this.
I'm going to talk about a story that I saw now. It was on Twitter, /X, whatever we call it now. And it's a tweet from the Green Party. I don't know if any of you saw this, gentlemen. They actually... Basically, they tweeted or put out all the names of the MPs who had either abstained or voted against the ceasefire vote in the Commons this week. They listed all the names. And they basically said, look, this is what Labour are like, you know, why don't you vote for us instead? Now, ignoring the fact we're not, you know, Joe Cox, David Amess, and yet you can see there, that's the actual tweet /X, and that's the list of names, naming and shaming, encouraging at the very least a social media pylon, potentially worse. But also what was particularly annoying, and I'm going to come to this one, Phil, for you, is the fact that they used it to try and say, don't vote Labour, vote for us, on the deaths of innocent children in Gaza and Israel. I just cannot get my head around what they've done. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think it was unwise. I mean, there was a very threatening, intimidatory protest outside Russian Rally's offices in London recently. I mean, I've had some deeply unpleasant emails from people about my support for Israel. Basically, I support Israel, and I've had some very unpleasant emails about it. A man spent a night in police custody not too long ago on the back of one of those emails. And I think, given how on the edge this kind of thing is, I think for the Green Party to go in a way that they've done is highly irresponsible. You know, people like Russian Rally, I don't agree with her on many things, but she's a very decent member of Parliament. And to have that kind of mob, baying mob outside of her office, I mean, Lord knows what would have happened if she'd have turned up to the office or left the office.
I live in Tower Hamlets. She's one of my local MPs. She's a young Muslim woman who has achieved incredible things. I mean, you know, she gets threats already from the right wing. She gets threats from sort of like, you know, her own family sometimes, or people linked to her own family. I mean, her own faith.
And of course, the staff.
You've got to admire what she's doing.
Her staff that are in the office as well. I mean, it's not just the MP; it's the staff who work for the MP who are there in the office. They're the ones who often get it as well. It's completely irresponsible, really. You can make your point without that.
Very much. Simon, what do you make of it?
Yeah, well, I think it's right that MPs should be held accountable in terms of how they voted, but the way in which the Green Party has used this, I think, is absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
And it's not what a political party should be doing. Absolutely.
No, I found it shocking. I mean, John.
Yeah, of course. I mean, was it a secret vote? Was it?
No, it's on the public record, the vote.
Yeah.
So why have they felt the need to do that?
It's just encouraging, as you said, Aaron Phil. It's a very volatile situation. We know that feelings are running high on all sides here, and I just think it was completely irresponsible.
And I'm not a politician. I'm a comedian. I don't know anything about politics. But how can you solve it? You can't solve it.
No, I don't.
You know, everyone has their own opinion.
Yeah.
And no one's right and no one's wrong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
If you waited a month of Sundays to look at it,
the
solve it.
one way I personally think you don't solve it is by naming and shaming people. So it was public vote and encouraging a pile-on at the very least.
Or mob rule, as
mob rule, absolutely. We have to move on. So, Phil, I'm looking forward to your man-hating feminists are a myth, say scientists story coming up later. Thanks for that one. Thank you, Simon, John and Phil. Now, don't go anywhere. We've still got loads more to come. I'll be asking, are young left-wing voters falling victim to groupthink? More on that very soon. You're with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with me, Dawn Neeson. In the light of the pro-Palestine protests that have taken place across the country this week, one man was spotted at a station getting rather riled up. Let's have a quick look at what he was doing, shall we?
These women here, go to Gaza. You want to go talk in Gaza? These women, they can't talk in Gaza. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's become fashion. It's fashion. It's fashion. This. It's fashionable, yes. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, does it? How many bombs? France, in Syria, here, London. All it is an excuse to hate Jews. People they're idiots. They're idiots, blind by hate.
As we were discussing earlier on, emotions are running very, very high, and you can understand why he was so angry to talk like that. And he has had a lot of support online for his views as well. With some of the other videos circulating on the internet over the past few weeks, it is also quite understandable as to why he was saying what he was saying. Shall we have a look at what these young ladies said when they were on a march?
Hamas invaded Israel on the 7th of October. What was your initial reaction to that?
I don't believe they did, they? Hamas? I think so. Honestly, I think I need to be a bit more clued up on everything that's going on. So I feel like I'm not really qualified to answer that too well. I mean, I'm not sure if I've seen anything that shows that that's actually happened or actually correct.
Now, I don't know about you, but I was actually shocked when I saw that. They weren't being sarcastic, they were being completely genuine, and they were actually on a march when they were asking those questions. They literally admitted they had no idea, basically, what they were marching for. So is this groupthink gone mad? I mean, and most of them are younger people, by the way, on these marches. Do the younger generation know exactly what they're protesting for? Or is it a classic case of, is it virtue signalling? I'm not even sure it's virtue signalling. It being seen to do the right thing, almost like it's fashionable. And I'm not taking anything away from anyone that is suffering in this conflict. It is horrific on both sides. But you do wonder why people are marching when they don't seem clear on the reasons why they are. But before we get to our debate on that one, let's go live to Bristol, to GB News South West of England reporter Jeff Moody. Jeff, what's happening down there today? Good morning, by the way. Lovely to see you again.
Good morning. Well, they're calling this a national day of action. Last week, the emphasis was on London, where hundreds of thousands of people demonstrated in central London in support of a ceasefire in Gaza. Now it's the turn of the regions. There are 100 events planned in various towns and cities across the country today, with the aim of allowing ordinary people to express their desire for a ceasefire in the province. Here in Bristol, there's going to be a massive demonstration at around 12:30 this afternoon in Castle Park. Some people have been arriving early with banners, but apart from that, it is fairly quiet at this hour. But we are hearing, somebody just shouted "Free Palestine," so there is a sense of people arriving here, coming here to demonstrate. There's going to be all sorts of speakers who are going to be making their points, and then a march through the city. And that is all in preparation for another big demonstration to take place in London next weekend. But for the moment, for today, the emphasis is on the cities around the country.
Jeff, is this the first time that Bristol has experienced a march or a gathering?
No, there's been several gatherings in recent days and weeks. Last week and the week before was the turn of schoolchildren who went on strike on Fridays and then came to a central location in Bristol, signed a petition and then marched up to City Hall to hand in a petition. So the feeling is getting stronger and stronger here, and those demonstrations are becoming more and more frequent here.
And we've obviously had lots of criticism about the way the Metropolitan Police have handled marches in London. How have things been handled in Bristol?
Well, so far the police are looking at this with a light touch. There isn't a great police presence at the moment. Roads haven't been shut off as yet. The idea is always to try and police it with a light touch if they have to, and then to intervene if there is trouble. But of course the hope is that if the police can sort of keep their distance a little and just watch and observe, then the march will take place without too many problems.
Brilliant. And Jeff, thank you very much for now. You'll be joining us throughout the day to report on how things go down in Bristol. So thank you very much for now. Now, joining me now to get to the bottom of the mess around, you know, people are angry. You don't know what you're marching for. Those young women you've just seen admitted they didn't really know what was going on. So joining me now to get to the bottom of this situation, I think is the right way to put it, is political commentator Lynn May and former Labour Party spokesman James Mathewson. Right, OK, thank you both for joining me very much. Lynn, I'm going to come to you first. Now, Lynn, you've seen both the clips and you hadn't seen that clip of those young ladies on that march. So what do you make of what you've seen, both examples today of the feelings on both sides?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly shocking that someone would have an actual placard and not know essentially why they're there, or not have the knowledge to understand what this conflict is about. But I think also at the same time, people have a right to protest, and I think many people are just turning up to the protest just to see a ceasefire, and that's OK as well. You don't have to understand the nuances. But if we look at Black Lives Matter, for example, I was criticised massively for not going to those marches, and people said, you know, do you not like black people? And I said, have you been on their website? Have you seen that they want to destroy the nuclear family, tear down, you know, masculinity, the police? And I don't support those values. And many people are unaware of actually what certain marches and causes are for. But I think the Palestinian march is a little bit different when we're seeing thousands of children being killed.
No, absolutely. James, let's come to you on this one. James, you've obviously seen both video clips now, and the very angry man in the station, implying that for some, in particular young women who would not have a voice in many countries, Palestine being one, Iran being another, he's saying, well, it is a fashion thing you're doing. You're not actually understanding why you're protesting or what it is like for young women in those countries. What do you make of what you've seen in those two clips?
Well, firstly, I can understand, obviously, that gentleman was incredibly upset and emotional, as is right, and as is the case with this situation for many people. However, I did find it fascinating that that was his takeaway from it, when all of the rights that these people have, that we're very lucky to have in our country, have been hard-won and have often been achieved through protest, through that direct access to democracy and democratic process that we enjoy here as a free country. So I did find it fascinating that that was his takeaway, because at the end of the day, for me, regardless of whether people know all the details, and I think we risk kind of ending up trying to mock younger people, especially younger people, because these are incredibly nuanced issues, and especially when it comes to foreign policy issues, they're incredibly complex a lot of the time. All those people want to see is children stop dying. They're seeing children die in a foreign country, they're moved by that, and they're so moved that they want to come out onto the street. And I think the fact that they know little about the details, but are still moved to do so, it reminds me similarly of the Stop the War marches against the Iraq War. People, they didn't know all the fine details of the complexity of, what the UN was doing, or all the kind of negotiations there. But what they did know was that they didn't want to see people die. And when people are moved in that way, they'll take action. And I think that's a fantastic reflection on our democracy.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the right to protest is enshrined, and we are lucky to live in the democracy where we have that right to protest, and everyone has that right to protest. The one thing I would say about the protest, Lynn, is, you know, we have had marches on the streets for Israel as well, and we have seen completely different behaviour from the people attending those marches. Why do you think we have seen a minority of people, granted, but why we have seen aggression and people clambering on statues on the pro-Palestinian marches, and yet the people marching for Israel and what happened on the October the 7th have been very, very peaceful. There's been no aggression, no climbing on statues, no offensive singing or placards. What do you think the difference is?
Well, on the contrary, to be honest with you, I've seen so much negativity and support for violence from people who actually support Israel as well. So going back to what you initially said, I think when you are so obsessive about one side without actually knowing, the same can be said for people who have an overwhelming support for Israel. I've asked multiple people, OK, so why are you so much in support of Israel? Have you been there? Have you got any connections to there? Have you read about the history of, you know, the creation of the state of Israel, where there's actually Orthodox Jews that are against Israel and the state of Israel? And then, oh, I didn't know that, but you're overwhelmingly supporting Israel. So I think for both sides, I think people do themselves a disservice to have this overwhelming support. And I actually think that it's an opportunity for many to look like they belong on social media to a certain fraction or a group, or a social media, you know, look at me selfie moment to say that I'm in support of something. So again, following on from your point, I think there is negativity on both sides, and there is massive amounts of positivity on both sides. But I think that certain social media platforms, as well as mainstream media, has cherry-picked what they want depending on which side they're trying to play into. So also, if we have a look at the marches when we saw people for Remembrance Day, we saw so much more aggression, and many of those people were in support of Israel than actually, if you look at how many people, some people even say between 500,000 and 8,000 people turned up. There was a very little disruption for people to actually say these were hate marches or, you know, marches of aggression. And we can see that that's actually not true.
James, very, very quickly, one final word to you. What would you say to Lynn May's point that people are doing it to get the clicks on social media? I'm simplifying it, but the clicks on social media to be seen to be supporting, whether it's Palestine, Israel, or indeed the patriots, as they called themselves, on Remembrance Weekend.
Well, I'm not entirely convinced that's what Lynn said, but also on top of that, I do think at the same time that what you have here is people not understanding why people are moved to come out. You know, yes, we recognise the democratic process and the right to protest is important, and many people will say that, and hardly anyone will dispute it. But then they're still mocking young people who care passionately about these issues. You know, it was like the same as when the Black Lives Matter protest happened, and we had people rolling their eyes because someone changed their Instagram picture to, you know, a black square. And you know, any act of solidarity like that, whilst it might seem tedious and you might want to roll your eyes at it, for me, it shows that democracy is working and that people have the right to be able to speak out when they feel so passionately about something. And when you're seeing children dying in the streets and babies being blown to pieces by bombs, there is nothing more emotive and nothing more likely to inspire young people to stand up and say, no, I know what's right and I know what's wrong, and that's wrong.
And let's just remind people that has happened on both sides. I mean, babies and children have died on both sides of this argument. No wonder emotions are running high. But Lynn and James, thank you very much for joining us this morning. But don't go anywhere, as there's lots more to come. Up next is the first part of Esperanfield's big interview with Lindsay Hoyle, as he celebrates 4 years in the Speaker's hot seat. Fascinated to find out what it actually means he does. Anyway, you're with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, last week, before a certain someone got a very exciting new job, Conservative MPs Esther McVey and Philip Davis sat down with Sir Lindsay Hoyle to talk all about his last 4 years as Speaker of the House of Commons. Let's have a look, shall we?
Hello, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for having us in your crimson room, so as to speak.
Well, welcome.
So, elected as the Speaker 4th of November 2019. So, your reflections on the last 4 years?
I think the first thing is never copy my lottery numbers, because obviously everything went wrong. You know, who would have thought? First of all, I get elected. Within days, there's a general election. During a general election, I end up being a type 1 diabetic. I then come back to the House. I've then got to get re-elected Speaker. I could have been the shortest Speaker in history. I survived that. We go through Brexit. We have a pandemic. Duke of Edinburgh dies. Her Majesty dies. We have 3 Prime Ministers in 6 weeks. Oh, yeah, it all went well, didn't it?
It's you. Is it you? Is it you? A bad
That's what I say. I'm obviously not lucky.
Right, well, you say you're not lucky, and yet, again, in November, we've just had the state opening, first time for a king in 70 years. So did anything go wrong with that, then?
To be honest, it was wonderful, wasn't it, in a sense, that when the House decides and we all come together, it works so well. And I've got to say, to me, it went without hiccup. I thought it was perfect. I thought the way that we got the Black Rod, myself had done the practice, and I've got to say, yeah, it went without hiccups to me. For once, we got it absolutely smooth. I've got to say, to stand there for for 70 years of history, you know, because none of us know anything different than the Queen. To have His Majesty presiding over the House of Peers and telling us what was in the King's speech, I thought was something that who would have thought it would happen? And to be Speaker during that, I've got to say, during my speakership, I've seen many things. And I've got to say, you know, things that have happened around the world, things that happen. But His Majesty doing the King's speech, I've got to say, what a great day. It was nice to come back. And what's interesting, when I walk back, people don't realise. So we walk back, Black Rod leaves me, I carry on, Sergeant Arms in front of me, march down, and I just walk straight out. I walk into the chamber, and I just walk out at the other end. I don't even stop to say hello to anyone. Woof, I'm out. That's it. I can then relax for 2 hours.
Now, most people will see you sat in that big chair in the chamber, and they'll probably only ever watch PMQs, and they know what you do there. You've heard now a little bit of your role there at the state opening, but what else does the Speaker do? How important is the role, and how important is it historically?
It's very historic, isn't it? You know, I've got to say, 158 Speaker, I've got to say, a privilege, the first ever Lancashire MP to be elected to become Speaker. The fact, of course, my great hero is Betty Boothroyd. So what I'm going to say, Lancashire and Yorkshire, great rivalries. We'll always unite against the South. So, you know, to have this absolute privilege to become Speaker is something really special. And I take it on board and say, look, you know, this matters. So, yes, I sit on, you know, I sit on that great throne, if you will, that great green chair. So that's 2 or 3 hours every day, whatever it is, I sit there. But it's everything else, and you're right. What else do I do? So I chair the commission. What's the commission? Well, basically, it's like a board of directors that run the House of Commons. So I'm involved in everything. So it could be we're negotiating the salaries for the next 2 years for staff. With
better get on his good
as
side.
well as MPs, yeah, absolutely. You know, those are just aside. Of course, security matters to me. I take it so seriously. We've lost 2 MPs. I certainly don't want to lose any more. So I work very close with our security here. I'm on top of that. I'm driving that. So it's everything that matters. You know, if something goes wrong, there's a piece of glass broken. What happened? It's reported to me. It's all those things that come together. You know, getting down to the price of a cup of tea going up, the things that really matter to people here, you know, where it seems to be with the amount of complaints I might get, you know, the catering, looking after staff. 3,000 people are a lot of people to worry about who work directly for the House of Commons. And of course, then we've got 650 MPs. We've also got all the MP staff. They all have to be looked after. And I've tried to change the way this house works. I've tried to look after people. I want us to be a really good employer. I want to be a shining example of what we should be. And the fact that we've been under a lot of pressure, whether that's MPs, whether it's staff, health and well-being. We know what it's like. We both come, well, all 3 of us come from the north. We represent northern constituencies. And when can you get to a doctor? If you're here Monday till Friday, and some people who spend all Fridays making sure we're here. And what I would say is that, you know, we don't get to our own doctors. Having that facility and that availability, having a nurse, having doctors, health and well-being of people's mental health also matters. So it's about trying to look after that. And of course, we have had problems with some MPs as well. So all that comes under my jurisdiction. So it's not about the 3 hours, it's everything else. It could be a visiting ambassador, it could be a head of state. I'm here to do all that as well. So what I would say is, it's not the sideline, the chamber really does matter, but it's everything else that fills the rest of the day.
Now, coming back to PMQs, every Prime Minister has always said that they get really nervous before Prime Minister's questions. Do you as Speaker get nervous before Prime Minister's questions?
No, I'm very lucky. Everybody needs a Speaker Secretary, you know. I've got to say, Helen does all that for me. She gets all worked up, she gets all agitated. You know, as Chief of Staff, she's got to take that responsibility. Because I always look at it this way. It's a bit like everything. It's like an election. You're going to win or lose. Whatever you do won't change it. It's going to happen. So in the same way that I go to PMQs and I think, well, whatever will be, will be. I can only do my best. If I don't, well, so be it. So it's no point getting worked up for it. So I have a Helen that works up for it.
He chucks people out though on occasion. You chuck people out if you think they're getting a bit boisterous.
Well, on that, I mean, it's difficult. It strikes me as a difficult balance because it's like I always think it's like theatre, PMQs. It's sort of like half an hour of two football teams cheering on their own side, really, in Parliament. And so lots of people, say, oh, why don't MPs behave better in Parliament? It's a really bad look for Parliament. On the other hand, the only time people ever want to come to visit is to watch PMQs. And I always think if we were sat there in stony silence, it would be boring and nobody would be interested. So how do you balance trying to keep it well behaved but not losing the atmosphere of the occasion?
Well, the good thing is, Philip, as you know, Philip, you're a good there for that value. I've got to say, I keep my eye on you. One of those, I've got to just watch from the back benches. No, you're right. It is pure theatre. But it is a way of backbenchers holding a Prime Minister to account on something local or something national. And the fact is, you're right, as much as it's theatre, the world watch it. Because it's about trying to make sure we have atmosphere without it boiling over. We want it to simmer, but never quite boil over. So it's getting that judgment right. But wherever I go in the world, I was in Canada, I'm walking down, a young person came up to me. You're the Speaker. Yeah. I watch PMQs. I think it's wonderful. And wherever I go, people watch PMQs. And that just shows, yes, it's theatre. Yes, of course it matters. But the world wants to watch Prime Minister's question. Where else does that happen? What other parliament has that worldwide interest? And it is worldwide. So I've got to say, I think we get it right. And that's why we are the oldest and the finest democracy.
Brilliant. I learned so much in that. I know it seems obvious, doesn't it? But actually, there are so many questions you wanted to ask, and he answered them brilliantly. Sounds brilliant fun. Right, now, joining me to divulge into the history of the role of the Speaker of the House of Commons is historian and broadcaster Rafe Haydel-Mancou, who is meant to be sitting on the sofa with me, but is sitting on his own sofa at home. Rafe, lovely. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you're feeling a bit poorly this morning. You've just watched the interview with the Speaker. I learned a lot, I must admit. You probably know all of it in any case. Do we have the only parliament that is like this? As Lindsay was saying, it is theatre. Does anyone else in the world do that sort of thing?
Yes, I mean, well, all legislatures need to have a presiding officer, obviously, to preside over affairs. The degree to which they do that and how animated a house is varies between countries. But in our tradition, with that very boisterous PMQs, which is sort of primetime viewing in America even. They love watching because they have nothing like that in Congress. But, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, I mean, basically the Commonwealth realms who've all inherited the mother of parliaments into their own tradition, they have that tradition too. The Australians perhaps have Britain beat when it comes to the most rambunctious and boisterous parliament legislature, but we come a close second to them.
Excellent. And who was the very first Speaker and how did that come about?
Well, so Sir Lindsay himself is the 158th Speaker. It's a very, very old office. It goes back to the year 1377 with that title of Speaker. Sir Thomas Hungerford was the first one to be so called. But Parliament itself actually has had a presiding officer of some form going back to at least 1258. But those early presiding officers were called parlors or prolocutors. And until the 17th century, actually, the Speaker was very much an agent of the King rather than an agent of the Commons. The problem with that, of course, was that they got blamed if they were bringing bad news from Parliament. And as a result of that, being Speaker was quite a perilous position to have. There were actually 7 speakers were beheaded in 100 years, which is why we have that tradition now. When a new Speaker is elected, you'll see 2 MPs dragging him into the chair, and that's because he's supposed to be reluctant to do it for fear of having his head chopped off. I
was going to ask you that. I mean, we're back in the day when we did chop people's heads off. That was a risk you took with that job. So it wasn't always something you volunteered for, was it? What's the worst thing that can happen to a Speaker now? I'm just getting sacked, I'm guessing.
Yes, well, I think he can be, the Speaker is in charge of the House, but he's still a servant of the House. So if MPs are upset with him, they can pass motions to censure him. We probably came closest to that with Sir Lindsay's predecessor, John Bercow, who was the most controversial and confrontational speaker in modern history, actually for centuries. And Sir Lindsay has made a great effort to, in his words, polish off the tarnish, let's say, that had gathered in the years immediately prior to him. So I think he's quite safe for the moment.
Rafe, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you feel better, lovely. Yeah, well, everything you want to know about the Speaker, I've learned a lot. That's all for this hour. But we'll be back after the break to go through all your top stories and look into what Jeremy Hunt has just had to say. Find out soon. You're with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality.
On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with me, Dawn Neeson. Coming up on the show this morning. Is it time for tax cuts? Jeremy Hunt has just spoken, so I'll be catching up on what he's had to say. And as the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, celebrates 4 years in the job, he joined Esther and Phil for a sit-down to look back on his career so far and what lies ahead. And I'll be chatting to you about by legendary former royal journalist Michael Cole to discuss all things royal. The latest series of The Crown is there. Truth to the olive branch that's been offered from the Duke spook in Sussex, and his father after a birthday phone call? Find out about that one. Plus, it's time for your weekly roundup of all the sports and showbiz stories. Stay tuned for the latest ahead of our very own Nigel Farage entering the I'm a Celebrity jungle. I'll also be joined by my wonderful presenters friends, MP for Shipley Philip Davies, former Labour MP for Rochdale Simon Danchuk, and author and comedian John Martin for a newspaper review with a difference. All that and much, much more coming up after the latest news with Tamsin Roberts.
Dawn, thanks very much, and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 11. Pro-Palestinian protesters are holding a national day of action across the UK instead of marching in the capital. Around 100 smaller rallies are planned at various locations around the country, with around 100,000 people expected in Glasgow. It's after thousands took to the streets of central London during Remembrance Weekend, calling for a ceasefire in Israel's war against Hamas. Meanwhile, in Gaza, more than 400,000 people are being told to leave the south as Israel tightens its focus on Hamas terrorists there. Earlier warnings saw scores of people move from the north amid the escalating conflict. Leaflets have been dropped by the IDF near the Khan Yunis area, telling people to move again, this time westward. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told US media that he understands the difficulty faced by civilians, but he doesn't want to see people caught in the crossfire. Israel also says it'll allow 2 truckloads of fuel into Gaza each day following international pressure. It's after the UN warned of rapidly deteriorating conditions. The White House says fuel deliveries should continue on a regular basis and in larger quantities. In other news, US companies including Disney and Warner Brothers have pulled advertising on X, formerly known as Twitter, amid a row over alleged anti-Semitism. It comes after the site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatred against white people. Meanwhile, IBM suspended all its advertising on the platform after its ads were seen next to pro-Nazi posts. The White House has denounced Elon Musk's endorsement of the post, condemning what they called an abhorrent promotion of anti-Semitic and racist hate. The Chancellor says there's a possibility taxes will be lowered in next week's autumn statement, arguing the economy had turned a corner. Jeremy Hunt says this is the moment to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year. In his strongest hint yet that tax cuts may be on the way, he signalled that his autumn statement will be one for growth. It's understood the Chancellor is considering cutting rates on inheritance and business taxes while squeezing benefits by billions. Just Stop Oil protesters are holding a People versus Oil protest in the capital later today. Activists will be meeting at the London Eye near the Shell headquarters. It's in protest against the government licensing more than 100 new oil and gas projects. The group says the government is imprisoning peaceful protesters and protecting the real criminals. GB News' Will Reporter is in central London.
Here outside of Shell, the oil company's headquarters, where there is a ring of steel around the building's base. That's because Just Stop Oil are coming right here today as they march through the capital city. They've described it as people versus oil. Thousands of people expected, and they're coming here for 3 reasons: to stand up to oil companies, to stand up to the Prime Minister, who they say is supporting these oil companies, and to fight for a better future for young people who they say are condemned to death by a system that favours oil over them.
More than a third of women who commute on the train are likely to experience sexual harassment. That's according to new figures from the British Transport Police. Reports of catcalling, unwelcome touching and indecent exposure are higher than ever, with more than 50% of women saying other passengers intervened to assist. The Transport Police is calling on people to be vigilant, report suspicious behaviour and step in to help where possible. And the creator of Wallace and Gromit and the Chicken Run films has enough clay for just one more film after its supplier ceased operations. When New Clay Products announced the closure of its facility near Torquay earlier this year. Aardman Animations quickly bought all its remaining stock. According to The Telegraph, the studio has just enough to complete its new Wallace and Gromit feature, due for release next year. Nuclei produced a particular kind of plasticine, which is apparently perfect for animating. Stop-motion artists say using the wrong kind would be like wearing the wrong trousers. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now it's back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Tamsin. I love Wallace and Gromit. Brilliant. Anyway, Jeremy Hunt is considering slashing the UK inheritance tax rate in the next week's autumn statement. The Chancellor has just been speaking, so let's hear what he has to say, shall we?
Your assessment that you received yesterday, will there be tax cuts, as you said in your Telegraph interview?
So we do a response to the announcement first, and then 3 questions, as we've said.
Okay, so give me your response.
Yeah, sure.
Can you give me a response to your announcement?
Sure. We want to... Sorry, start again. It's very important that we find a way to reduce the tax burden on working families, but there are no shortcuts. In the end, we have to run public services more efficiently, and that's why I'm here with the new Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, looking at a shining example as to how we can do things better. Here in Milton Keynes, you've got the police service, the fire service, the ambulance service, all together in the same building, working much more effectively, able to give a much better service to the public. And that focus on more productivity with the money that is spent by taxpayers is ultimately the only way that we can reduce the pressure on families from tax.
Tell us that you got an OBR assessment yesterday. What can you tell us about that? And will there be tax cuts, as you said in your Telegraph interview?
Well, the OBR numbers and forecasts will be published on Wednesday at the autumn statement. But there is no easy route to reducing the tax burden. The way we do it is by spending taxpayers' money more wisely, and that means having more productive public services. Today I met police officers who say they waste potentially a whole day every week filling out forms, redacting forms before they send them to the Crown Prosecution Service. I talked to people in the ambulance service who waste hours and hours every day waiting at hospitals to hand over patients. If we tackle those kind of inefficiencies, we can stop the tax burden rising, and that is a big priority for the government.
Will there be tax cuts on Wednesday?
You'll have to wait until Wednesday to see the decisions we take. When it comes to tax, I know there's been a lot of speculation. We will not do anything that compromises the battle against inflation. We have succeeded this week in halving inflation compared to when I became Chancellor and Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. That is the single most important thing we've done, and we will not do anything to jeopardise the progress.
Is inheritance really...
OK, right. Now, joining me to react to this, it was a bit awkward, wasn't it? It has to be said, is the former editor of Labourist Peter Edwards and Conservative MP for Shipley, Philip Davis. Philip, I'm going to come to you first. What did you make of what you've just heard, and in the way it was delivered as well, which I found very stilted?
Yeah, I think it was like a pre-recorded interview that went out live, it seemed to me. But I think it was more interesting to focus on what he actually said than than that awkwardness. Look, I mean, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have said all the way along that we've got to get inflation down first before we can cut taxes. We've got inflation down now, so let's start seeing some tax cuts would be my message. And, you know, the tax cuts I want to see, and I've said this directly to Jeremy Hunt, I want to see business taxes cut. I'd like to see a reduction in corporation tax. I want to see something done on the tax thresholds. There are so many people now paying the top rate of tax who really shouldn't be paying the top rate of tax because the thresholds haven't increased. We need to address that. And I'd like to see us do something on inheritance tax, which is a grossly unfair tax. And even though I don't think we're in a position to abolish inheritance tax, I think the Chancellor could make a down payment, perhaps on a route to abolishing it in the next Parliament, should we win the next election.
And it is true, there's a lot of people who are going to be affected by what we call the stealth taxes, aren't there? Let's come to you, Peter. Peter Edwards joining us as well. What do you make of what you've just heard Jeremy Hunt say?
Well, I wouldn't criticise Jeremy Hunt for hesitating in front of a camera. We've all done it occasionally. But on the substance, it looks like there may be a tax cut of some kind. I mean, what's telling from the last few days in the newspapers is that Treasury spinners would have had a chance to kill off some of the speculation. They've chosen not to do that. A lot of that speculation, he said, is focused on inheritance tax. But IHT is only paid by about 4% of its states. So you have to think about why the Tories are doing it. Labour would attack it correctly as a tax cut for the wealthiest households. That would just be a fact if inheritance tax is cut. So if Jeremy Hunt is considering doing it and he knows it will be attacked in that way, I suspect it's because he feels it will shore up a Tory vote in the southeast of England.
Is that a fair accusation, Philip, that it will actually... it's just a vote winner for the people that are more likely to vote Tory? I mean, inheritance tax, it affects between, what, 4 and 6% of people in this country?
Yeah, but it's about aspiration. It's a tax on aspiration. Whether people are affected by it today or not is one thing. It's lots of people think that one day it will affect them. It's about, and the Conservative Party is about aspiration. And the one thing I'd take issue there with Peter is that in a YouGov poll from earlier this year, it actually showed that 40% of Labour voters are in favour of abolishing it altogether. 40% of Labour voters want inheritance tax abolished. So I don't accept this argument that this is just red meat for Conservatives. This inheritance tax is an unfair tax, and that's recognised right across the political spectrum.
Peter, what would you say to that? It's an unfair tax.
All taxes are unfair, feel unfair to a certain extent, don't they? I think that's the one I feel that's unfair most is the rise in VAT from 17.5% to 20% that the coalition did, because that hits the poorest most, so it's regressive. But that will be dismissed by the Tories as ancient history. To touch upon Philip's point, I think where he's correct is that the fear of inheritance tax is much higher. So several polls have showed 20, 30, 40% of people are worried about paying inheritance tax, even though when someone passes away and the estate is settled up, only 4% or just under actually pay it. So it's something that does figure in the political debate, and obviously David Cameron made changes to it that made it more generous. But we have to think about, of course, why the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is thinking about doing this now. We know the public finances are very stretched after COVID. I would say Brexit has had a detrimental impact as well. But the alternative, because there's been no speculation about my suggestion, which is VAT, most of the other speculation has been about whether they'd knock a penny or two off income tax. And the general feeling in the Treasury is that making a change to IHT, which could be a cut or abolition, is a bit cheaper. So that's why there's been so much speculation over the last week, because it's perceived as slightly more affordable for the Exchequer.
OK, unfortunately, we've run out of time on that now. Peter Edwards, thank you very much for joining us. Philip is not going anywhere, he's staying with me. Now, to look through the top stories of today. We're rejoined by Philip, you've just heard and seen there, MP for Shipley, former Labour MP for Rochdale, Simon Danchuk, and author and comedian John Martin, who I'm keeping a very wary eye on this time. I can tell you. Right, now, OK, this is scary, isn't it? We've already done Ginger and your sex life. So you missed that. I think you can catch up somehow. It's probably on social media, I don't know. Right, OK. Actually, Simon, I'm going to come to you first, because this is one that you picked, and you particularly want to talk about this story. It's right in the Mirror today. Tell us more.
I like it. It's a celebratory story, really. Kelly Barker, well done to her. She's Slimming World's Woman of the Year. She's lost 18 stone. I think that's a real credit. It's in all of the papers today. John was telling me earlier he's on the seafood diet. He sees food and he eats it, basically.
Hey, I'll have you know, I joined Weight Watchers on the internet last week. And do you know what the first question they asked me was? Will you accept cookies? Last Christmas, I asked my wife to get me something to take me breath away, and she did. She got me a treadmill. So.
Whichever producer hired this one, you're sacked. Okay, actually, I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to stay with you because you've selected a story about a woolly mammoth. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, they're talking about bringing a woolly mammoth back. Obviously, this is following on from bringing David Cameron back. Maybe he'll get a seat in the House of Lords, I don't know. But can I just go back to this tax thing? I know you're talking about it. You know, they're talking about a cut in business tax. During the pandemic, millions, and I'm being serious, millions, this is a theme of mine, I've done it on previous shows, millions of businesses, small businesses, limited companies, freelancers, got nothing. And now they're talking about, oh, there's so many less self-employed people. I wonder why. Why don't they look at something like backtracking and saying, OK, we've been very unfair the way we discriminated against millions of small business, and they're not going to get them votes back.
No,
you know, this government is toast.
Yeah, and
it's
just
toast.
You're right, and reading some of the messages on here as well about tax cuts on small businesses are, you know, why are you not talking about the VIP lanes and people like Michelle Mone and things like that?
Well, absolutely.
Lots of comments coming in on this one. However, Phil, I did promise you would talk about this one, so I'm going to give you opportunity. This is from The Times. Man-hating feminists are a myth, say scientists.
Yes, apparently this is what apparently research carried out by the University of Surrey. They did a study of 10,000 people in 9 countries, and it found that the headline was that feminists have largely positive attitudes towards men, and in fact feminists were about as positive about men as men were. Now, I was slightly surprised by this. Are you a feminist, Dawn?
If a feminist...
They put you on the spot there, Dawn.
I was going to try out the survey.
If a feminist means believing that men and women have equality, then yes, I am a feminist. Was that the right answer?
I don't know. Are you a man-hater?
I can eat a whole one. Well, maybe I could. No, I don't hate men. Of course, I'm married to one.
Yeah, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you... In my experience, I'm not sure.
Morning, Esther.
But anyway, I think it was interesting. I mean, my family, my great-grandma was a suffragette, even, yeah. So I come from that kind of heritage. But, you see, I've gone off feminist to a certain extent because, like you, I think feminist means about, you know, everyone should be equal, I'm fine. My problem with modern-day feminists is that they seem to want equality when it suits them, but then they want special treatment when it suits them. They don't want to be given the same prison sentences that men are given by the courts because they should be given special treatment because they're a woman, but they want equality when it suits. Now, my view is if you want equality, you can't pick and choose what your equality is. You've got to have the full Monty. And so,
you know what's incredible, Don? Philip this morning is talking common sense. I've no idea where he gets that from. My wife said I have 2 faults. First one, I don't listen, and
Right, on that, I am going to go to a break. Thank you.
No.
We've had Sceptre, fully mammoths, and feminism. Where else do you get that? Right, so don't go anywhere. Still, lots to come, including the second part of Esther and Phil's Sit Down with the Speaker as he celebrates 4 years in the hot seat. You're with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, earlier this month, the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, celebrates 4 years in the top job. He joined Esther and Phil for a sit-down to look back on his career so far and what lies ahead for the future. Bearing in mind we used to chop the Speaker's heads off, not that, well, possibly not that, who knows. Take a look at the second part of their great interview.
Now, there has been a lot of scandals with MPs, I'd say of late in particular, and a lot of by-elections. And lots of the members of the public must say, bloomin' heck, what's going on in there? What's the behaviour like in there? As the Speaker, how do you think it's come across? Is it as bad as people think? Or is the scrutiny of MPs much greater than any other profession? What do you think?
Look, we can't show it. Some of those things that are coming out are awful, and nobody wants it in any workplace. It's the fact that we've allowed people to come forward to put those complaints. Previously, there was no system. So are we worse than what we used to be? Who knows? What I do know is that we get an ability that somebody says, this happened to me, there is a way of reporting that now where there never was before. Hence why I believe we've had more come out of the system than we had. You know, the ICGS is a new way of being able to report it, where I'm not involved in it, and that's good. The House decided the Speaker shouldn't be involved, but people can do it independently. They can do it without people being intimidated, and the fact that they can report. And that's why I genuinely believe we've seen more cases coming forward that we would never have heard of previously. And that has to be good, where people feel they're not suppressed, that they can't come and it can be dealt with. Because there is a big power issue. We run MPs' offices, we are in charge, we are the employer. The House aren't the employer, we're the employer. And sometimes that people may take advantage of circumstance. The way that we treat our staff matters. And I think that that is a good way forward. We've got to tidy up and have people who can believe that this is the best place to work. And MPs are not bad. We may have a couple of bad examples out there, but overall, I think we're pretty good at the way that we do it. And I want to make sure that MPs looked at, but I've got to look also after the people who work in this House, but also the staff that work for MPs. And it's about ensuring that that power dimension can be answered if it goes wrong. And I want to intervene earlier before it gets out of control. And that's the way that we're changing the House system now.
And then there are things that you've got to take into consideration and balance up. And there's been, sexual complaints of a, sexual or bullying nature. And I guess you've got to, first of all, in no particular order, but you've got the safety of the staff. You've got innocent until proven guilty. And you've also got, how does that MP represent their constituents if they can't come into the House and they can't ask a question? So how do you balance all of that up?
We've got to balance that with the risk, haven't we? Because in the end, some cases we don't even know about because it's being done in private, so I wouldn't know. So I can't make a decision on that. What I would say is, if it's a police issue, that takes us to a different level. And we've got to make it on that judgment, because in the end, we do take advice from the police. There is safeguarding issues that we've got to listen to. So it's done in the best possible way to get that judgment right. What I would say is that if we have a problem, it needs to be resolved quickly. What I do bother about, and I think we're trying to get to the same point here, I'm very concerned about an accusation to an MP that could go on forever before that gets resolved. That concerns me, and it really does worry me. One, for the person who's made the allegation, but two, for a Member of Parliament. And you're absolutely right. They're innocent, proven guilty. And therefore, we need an early decision on those allegations, not something that rolls on until somebody gets round to it. That cannot be right. So I think we're absolutely united on that. We need an early investigation, an early decision to put it right. The other thing is that we have seen is that parties sit on things as well, where maybe sometimes parties ought to say, this is so serious, it should be referred elsewhere.
One of the things that you've been very hot on is the...
this chair, while we've been interviewing him.
Is security of MPs. I mean, and not just in recent times. When you were the Deputy Speaker, you took a leading role in trying to improve the security of MPs. How do you feel... I mean, we obviously had the terrible loss of Joe Cox and David Amos, who were, good friends to many of us in Parliament. Where do you think we are at the moment with security of MPs?
And you're right, let's go back. I got involved in security, I was asked to do as Deputy Speaker, and my concern was there was nothing there for MPs. We had the clerks of the House that said, we're interested in the building, we're interested in anything that happens. You walk through that gate, you're on your own. Get on with it, old chap. And that's how the attitude seemed to be. I said, this can't be right. We have a responsibility whether we're inside this building or outside. It's no you say, no, it's for the police to worry about. That was never going to happen. So from there, and tragically, Joe Cox speeded everything up I was trying to do. And it shouldn't take the death of an MP to trying to get the authorities to respond earlier. And I've got to say, Joe Cox was a shining example of an MP with a big future, a great political future, and she was robbed. She was robbed from all of us, from an extremist. And therefore, suddenly, I had a period, it's amazing, isn't it? 3 weeks, I can have what I want. 6 weeks, it starts to wane. After that, people start to forget. And what we tried to do was put a lot of measures in place to try and ensure we're going forward. And that's what I've tried to review the measures, increase the measures, up our security in all shapes and forms, outside the House, inside the House, without going into detail. We've lifted it to a whole new level. I would say that we are one of the best examples where people from other parliaments come to us to copy what we do. And of course, there's always more. So all the time I'm asking to do reviews, to put more in place, and I believe we've hit that difficult point again. We're at a point, and Sir David Amos was another example of, actually, he shouldn't, David was a friend to whatever party he belonged to. David was a character, he was part of the House, he was jovial, everybody's friend. And for David to be a victim, and he was a victim of extremism because he was too open to people. And he allowed somebody to come to him who came from London. Now, under my rules, he should never have met them. But David, being David, such a nice person, he should be still with us. Tragically, another one who was murdered by a terrorist. And we have people who radicalise at home and come who do not share our values, do not believe in democracy. And we've got to recognise that's out there. And I think we've hit another high level. Whatever I can do to put forward, I am working on some new measures to try and put that extra protection round again. Because I do think the world is in a dangerous place and politicians are always at the forefront of that danger as well. So what I would say is, I take it seriously, I will continue to take it seriously. And speaking all the time at the meeting today on security, I will continue to do that, to put the measures in place that are appropriate and measured. And we've got to protect. If we don't protect democracy, we are just along with the rest.
Well, I'm going to end there, because I think that's a wonderful place to end. You're protecting, we're all protecting democracy, because that's what makes this country great. Thank you.
Well, thank you to both of you. Thank you.
What a brilliant interview. I learned so much by that, and I really feel ignorant that I didn't know half of it in any case. Right, now I'm delighted to still be joined by historian and broadcaster Rafe Hayden-Manku. Rafe, thank you very much. Where are you, Rafe? Rafe, you are there. I know you can hear me, and there you are. Thank you very much. You're much better to look at as well.
Yeah.
Right, Rafe. Obviously, you're watching that. You know, the one thing that I thought was quite important that Sir Lindsay was talking about there was, in particular in the environment we are today, the security of MPs in the House. I mean, obviously, that has been Sir Lindsay's personal thing as well, but how much responsibility does the Speaker have for the people that he is in charge of in that chamber?
He's got a huge amount of responsibility, not just for people in the chamber, but actually all of the employees in the Palace of Westminster, which he shares with the Lord Speaker. And he is, of course, you know, you have to understand that the Speaker essentially is the CEO of the House of Commons. Mm-hmm. He's the highest authority there. And, you know, his role, of course, as we know, is to preside over debates and to represent the House. But he's also responsible for the administration of the House of Commons. And that's actually the area that deals with security, but also human resources, for example, all Freedom of Information Acts, making sure that, you know, the other staff are being well treated. And that's all a relatively recent expansion of the role of the Speaker that we've seen over the last 30, 40 years. Previous generations of Speakers never had to deal with.
Rafe, I think, have you actually pressed a... Rafe, can you hear me? You might have pressed a mute button there. Rafe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, marvellous. You weren't very quiet there. I thought you might just start whispering sweet nothings to me. Sorry, I think we missed the last bit of you saying. Could you just sort of, like, catch up on what the last point you made?
Yes, I was just saying, so Lindsay's job as Speaker is a lot more complicated, a lot more difficult than it was for previous generations of Speakers. And he has to deal with human resources, not looking just after the MP, but also the wider staff there in Parliament, including security, ably assisted by his sergeant at arms, it should be said as well. But the role and responsibility is taken a lot more seriously, especially now because, of course, with social media, society's become so much more radicalised by these issues that, of course, every day there's a growing threat to MPs.
Yeah, brilliant. Rafe, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Much more to come, indeed. But first, let's get you up to speed on all the latest news with Tamsin Roberts.
Dawn, thank you. Here are the headlines at 11:33. The Chancellor says there's a possibility taxes will be lowered in next week's autumn statement, arguing the economy had turned a corner. Jeremy Hunt says this is the moment to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year. It's understood the Chancellor is considering cutting rates on inheritance and business taxes while squeezing benefits by millions.
BR numbers and forecasts will be published on Wednesday at the autumn statement. But there is no easy route to reducing the tax burden. The way we do it is by spending taxpayers' money more wisely, and that means having more productive public services.
Pro-Palestinian protesters are holding a national day of action across the UK. Around 100 rallies are planned at various locations, with around 100,000 people expected in Glasgow. It's after thousands took to the streets of central London during Remembrance Weekend, calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Meanwhile, in Gaza, more than 400,000 people are being told to leave the south as Israel tightens its focus on Hamas terrorists there. Earlier warnings saw thousands move from the north amid the escalating conflict. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told US media he understands the difficulty faced by civilians, but that he doesn't want to see people caught up in the crossfire. US companies, including Disney and Warner Brothers, have pulled advertising on X, formerly Twitter, amid a row over alleged anti-Semitism. It comes after the site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatred against white people. The White House called it an abhorrent promotion of anti-Semitic and racist hate. Well, those are the headlines, and you can, of course, get more on all of those stories. Just visit our website, gbnews.com. Dawn will be back in just after the break.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back. You have been getting in touch with your thoughts, and we've finally got some time to share them. It's been such a busy show. But thank you for all your comments. Really enjoyed reading them. Now, Richard sent. Remember, Richard, we showed you a picture of a carrot that looked like Homer Simpson, basically, because why wouldn't we? It's a Saturday morning. So Richard sent in this photo. I don't think he can take credit, but would like to share it. Now, I'm going to be romantic and say it looks like a heart. There are some people that would say it looks a bit like a bottom. Meanwhile, Daryl also sent in his rather large carrot. This is not a euphemism. Blimey, that's not a euphemism. That really is a large carrot. Could be the angle, I guess, or a very small pints. And meanwhile, this is dangerous, this is. And meanwhile, Jeff sent in his rather odd-looking potato. Jeff, I think you might have cheated slightly on that one. Just saying. I mean, potatoes have eyes, I know, but probably not in felt tip. But thank you very much for trying. Full marks there. OK, we move on from funny-shaped fruit and vegetables. Right, thankfully, not the rude ones. We had some rude ones, but you're not seeing them. Not yet. Well, another week has almost passed, so it's time to see what the royals have been up to, and who better to give us the lowdown than legendary former royal journalist Michael Cole. Michael, and there you are indeed. Michael, thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday morning. So, there's... Well, let's start with the happy stuff, right? OK, let's start with Prince Charles's birthday. He was 75 last week, and how did that go? Was it a happy family occasion?
I think it was, Dawn. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yes, quite an achievement, 3/4 of a century. I've observed the King since he was born. I remember I was 5 years old. My mother turned to me and said, Princess Elizabeth's had a baby. Well, I remember him throughout his childhood. I remember being at primary school, and we bought national savings stamps. The half-crown one had Prince Charles's face on, and the sixpenny one only had Princess Anne's face on. So immediately there was a pecking order there. And one has seen him throughout his life. It's extraordinary because during the 50s, when he was growing up, he seemed a little bit geeky. He didn't look quite right. The ears stuck out and all the rest of it. And when he went to university, when he went to Cambridge, he hung out with, I think, really the wrong people. He didn't think socially. Mainly his friends were the landed gentry and people who were a bit like him. And he sort of discovered the Goon Show when we'd all moved on to Monty Python's Flying Circus. So he seemed a little bit old. I always felt that he was sort of born 50 years old. But you know what's happened now, Dawn? I've never seen him so happy, so relaxed, so much enjoying himself after the longest apprenticeship in history, more than 70 years, waiting for the top job. He's really relishing it. And of course, compared with his mother's wonderful record-breaking more than 70-year reign, his will be a short reign, but a short reign can be extremely successful. His great-great-grandfather, Edward VII, reigned only for 9 years, but gave his name to the Edwardian era. And here we see the king in all his majesty opening Parliament, state opening of Parliament, which, of course, has been around his birthday. That was a great occasion, and I thought it was brilliantly staged and carried off in great style.
Michael, Michael, I have to mention them. You know I do. It's literally written in the contract. There is a thorn on the side. He had a lovely happy birthday, and he looked very happy, as you say. But there is a new book coming out by Omid Scobie, isn't there, who wrote that, the first... Not that Harry and Meghan had anything to do with it, unless they were asked in the High Court, in which they suddenly did. But Omid Scobie has got a new book coming out called Endgame, which he denies the Duchess of Sussex had anything to do with. How do you think this is going to go down with Charles?
Endgame. Well, I think everybody who knows anything about it has said, why? Why do you have to go over the details of the way in which Her Majesty the Queen met her death? Other critics have said that it's really a compilation of published material. There's absolutely nothing in it. But it does seem to be seen through a Sussex focus, a Harry and Meghan focus. It says favourable things about them and less favourable things about other members of the royal family. And what happened on the terrible day the Queen died, and of course Prince Harry seems to resent the fact that he wasn't on the royal aircraft up to Balmoral, and he wasn't there, he didn't arrive in time for his grandmother's death, and he heard it on the radio. Well, he was just late for the plane, and other members of the royal family had to take to get there. So, I mean, it's a lot of special pleading. I don't know whether it adds much to the sum of knowledge. But you know, Dawn, what I really think is worth talking about is The Crown, the sixth season of The Crown. I had to steel myself last night to watch the first episode with my wife. I wasn't looking forward to it because I know I knew many of the people who were involved in it. And of course, you see the beautiful Australian actress, Elizabeth Debicki, who plays Diana with luminous beauty, even more beautiful than Diana was, and Diana was beautiful. And she gets it right. She has a lot. She does it right. She has the gestures right. She has the voice right. And also, the young actor who plays Dodie, he certainly has his voice right. I mean, it was quite eerie for me to hear it. And of course, I don't know whether you agree with this, Dawn, but I think men fall in love through their eyes, women through what they hear, their ears. And Diana loved the way that Dodie spoke. She recorded his recorded messages on her phone and played them to her friends and said, listen to his voice. And they've got that right. This is a later episode, which I haven't seen yet. But of course, it's terribly painful. There are many, many errors in it. But it's not a documentary, it's a drama. And dramatic license means that changes are made. One thing they have got right is how Diana really loved the family atmosphere of the Fired family. Since her mother walked out when she was 6, she stood at the gate and she saw her mother walk away. Diana had always wanted nothing more than being part of a happy family, and she saw that in the Fired family. And I think that's what warmed her to Dodie, because he was a big brother to his 4 siblings, and they really loved him. And she saw
Michael, unfortunately, we've run out of time there. I could talk to you all day because there is so much. As I said, I've never watched The Crown, but I was lucky enough to interview Diana, which is one of the reasons I won't watch it, because I just want to remember the woman rather than any dramatised event. Thank you.
I totally understand. I think you're quite wise.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Michael Cole, there, Royal Expert. Now, time for your weekly dose of sports and showbiz. She says, looking nervously to the sofa. And I'm delighted to have our very own sports guru, Ada McGee, and the gorgeous, glamorous showbiz journalist. This is why I'm nervous. She always looks like that, even going to Tesco's. Hayley Palmer, both joining me on the sofa of doom in the studio. Right, now, I've worked with you two before, so I know what you're like. So I'm going to ask you very politely, who wants to go first? Do you want to do sport or showbiz?
I'll go first, yeah.
No, I'll go first. No, go for it, go for it.
See, this is what I do.
You could bore us with your showbiz.
No, listen, there's nothing boring, especially not if you're an Everton fan. This was a seismic story yesterday. Everton Football Club hit with a 10-point deduction for breaching financial rules. Those financial rules, Dawn, you'll be familiar with them as a football fan. The profit and sustainability test laid down by the Premier League. It means that they've gone down to 19th in the table on just 4 points. So the rules are, for those who aren't familiar, are basically on profit and sustainability test is that over 3 years you can't spend more than you earn, although you are permitted a loss of £105 million over 3 years. Everton have superseded that, and that's why they're in the dock, and it spells trouble now for Manchester City and Chelsea, because Manchester City, in contrast to Everton's one charge, have 114.
This is what I'm confused about. There does seem to be an element of unfairness with this. From what I can work out, and it is actually quite complicated when you drill down into it, but what I can work out, Everton have actually been very cooperative.
They have.
They have worked with the FA, and they're the ones that have been punished, like, straight away.
Yeah, OK, but if they've broken the rules, they've broken the rules. If you notice yesterday in the statement, their acting interim CEO, Colin Chung, said that basically he didn't say it didn't couch it in these terms, but he said that they're basically accepting the verdict, but it's the severity of the punishment. Now, there's politics in the background of this as well, Dawn, because as a football regulator on the horizon, we saw the King Charles there making a speech in Parliament. He said in that speech that there would be a football regulator, and that's what the Premier League are petrified of, because they don't want anybody else, external body, going through the books. But listen, we've seen that precedent set for Everton. There's no saying that. I mean, it could be relegation for City and it could be relegation for Chelsea. Who knows?
Well, the whole clubs like West Ham, that's for sure. And there was another fall. It's an international break, obviously, if you're not into football, which means England were playing last night.
Yeah, dreadful. Yeah.
I wasn't going to say that. I was just going to say it was like.
I needed some sleep. So I was able to get some.
Dull, wasn't it?
It was either that or watch Hayley's Cobras up there.
So we beat. Oh, ouch! We beat Malta though, but
yeah,
2-0.
It was awful. I mean, he just played a load of players that have been tried and tested, but it was a chance to look at other players. Your own James Ward-Prowse, disappointed he didn't get into the side. They didn't register a shot on target, or in fact a shot off target, until the 63rd minute, I believe. Even though England were 1-0 up, but that was because it was an own goal.
I was slightly in bed by that point. And Formula One, you want to mention Formula One quickly?
Yeah, just quickly, the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc is on top as of in qualifying this morning, but the practice sessions yesterday were an absolute disaster. They started 2.5 hours late. They found a pothole in the road as soon as Carlos Sainz's car with a downward pressure pulled up a manhole. The fans won't even get their money back because they bought the tickets in over 3 days. It's been a complete shambles. Verstappen called it a circus, and I wonder whether, given that we already have 2 US Grand Prix already, I wonder whether we'll see it back there, but money talks.
Right, OK, indeed. Talking of which, looking as lovely as ever. Right, so let's talk showbiz now.
Yes.
What story do you want to start with?
Well, first of all, I want to say I don't go to Tesco's looking like this.
You do? OK,
I've got beautiful glittery shoes on. They come off, the trainers come on, I promise.
OK, but the rest of it stays the same, right?
Yeah. But anyway, we're going to talk about I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, because I am going to be staying in now because this is going to be my life, Dawn.
GBNews' very own Nigel Farage in the jungle.
So apparently, news is that he's going to be dropped into the desert with 2 others of them, and they're going to be really hot, doing challenges, but the rest of them are going to be going to the Gold Coast. So apparently that is the latest news there.
Right, OK. And when does it start, Hayley?
It starts tomorrow night.
Right, OK.
Nobody call me or anything because I'm glued to the TV.
OK.
This is going to be me now. I think, personally, my prediction is that Josie Gibson's going to win. I'm going to say it right here, and my showbiz predictions are always bang on.
You are always accurate. I mean, and the thing is, we were just talking during the break as well about this, but the people that win reality TV shows, whether it is Jungle or Big Brother, tend to be nice.
Yeah.
They're nice people.
You've got to be relatable.
Yeah.
It's the likeability. No, you
just
have
like
no
used
chance.
to.
Yeah, like 0 chance for Aidan McGee. But I think if I was in there... No, do you know, I can't do camping, Dawn. Like, one night camping...
No, I can imagine that might be a bit of
I can only do the Versace Hotel. But also we've got Danielle Harrell of EastEnders. She's lovely. I met her at the NTA Awards. She's so nice. Marvin Humes, JLS. Let's get the dance moves going. Sam Thompson. Now, he's my mum's favourite. He's like a little golden Labrador. He's beautiful.
Right. I'm looking at you like I know what he was talking about with Everton. I am really...
Think about camping, though. It's intense.
Oh, goodness. I do apologise, Dawn. You're going to have to put up with this.
Oh, my God, you'd be voting him out straight away, wouldn't you?
But Jamie Lynn Spears, Britney Spears' sister. Let's get all the gossip from her. Nick Pickard, Hollyoaks, Fred from First Dates. Love him. He's a character. So you've got big names going in there. The 2 I don't know is Grace Dent, who's a food critic.
She's a food critic. She's on MasterChef. I don't know her personally, but yeah.
And Nella Rose, who's a YouTuber. I don't know who she is. They always put like a token YouTuber, TikTok star in there. But apparently there's going to be some great challenges. There's a challenge on TikTok at the moment where people are eating this disgusting fish, and they're going to use that challenge from TikTok to put into the jungle.
Right.
So there we go.
Good luck, Nigel, and everyone else. Right, OK. And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about quickly, Kat Deeley.
Yes.
Going to be the new Holly Willoughby.
Yes.
Is this true?
Yeah, she's starting Monday.
Yeah.
With her husband, Patrick.
But yeah, Kat and Pat.
Kat and Pat, love that. Love what they've done there. But do you know what? I think they'd be really good because they're husband and wife. They know each other so well. I think they're likeable, and I think it's a good choice.
Yeah.
I mean, Kat's been on This Week with Rylan.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't not like her. She's beautiful. She's very warming.
Been in the game a long time.
She liked one of my tweets about 5 years ago.
Oh dear.
Really?
OK, that's not...
I've just suddenly gone off her slightly, you know.
Oh, have you?
No, I'm joking.
No, I think it's a good, safe choice. And actually, do you know what, everyone? Give them a chance. We're all like, oh, my God, are they good, are they bad? No, let's have a look at them for the next couple of months.
Put on the ball, see how it goes.
I think you two should go in the jungle definitely next time, especially if you wear those shoes and if you get a matching pair. I'll be voting for you. Right, well, sadly that's it from me, but thank you all so much for your company and thank you for my wonderful guests. Up next, it's GB News Saturday with Darren Grimes, so don't go anywhere. That's going to be a good one. Have a lovely weekend and I'll see you again soon at some point. Take care of yourself. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead for the rest of today, it will start to turn brighter from the west, but we will still see some further rain at times. It's all associated with this huge area of low pressure. The weather fronts are working their way in towards the North Sea, but behind it we will see some further rain, especially as we go into this afternoon across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Brightest of the skies down towards England and Wales, and for most it is a mild feeling day. Certainly for the southern half of the country we could see highs reaching around 16, maybe even 17 degrees in the odd spot. So into this evening, we continue to see some further rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some of that could be quite heavy in places. England and Wales generally drier with some clearer skies, but the odd shower will move in across western parts and quite blustery, especially down towards southwestern parts of the country and up towards the Northern Isles of Scotland. But for most, it's a mild night. Temperatures across all parts of the country staying firmly in mid to high single figures. So we start Sunday off on a fairly unsettled note, scattering of showers for most parts. Showers merging into longer spells of rain at times too. In between there'll be the odd bright spell, but for many it is another mild day, but quite blustery, especially along English Channel coasts.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.